Hey everyone! Tonight we step into a story that begins with flowers, champagne, and a lie so sharp it could slice through silk. You might not survive this one, so before you get too comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you truly enjoy what I'm doing here. And if you're watching this somewhere quiet, drop a comment with your city and the time. I always love knowing where my voice is finding you. Now, turn off the lights. Maybe let a fan run for some gentle white noise. And let's begin tonight's journey together. It was the kind of morning that made lies look beautiful. The Greenwich mansion smelled like jasmine and roasted coffee, the kind of luxury you can't fake. It was Marcus's birthday 40, charming, powerful, the kind of man whose reflection smiled back at him in every camera flash. And I was the loyal wife. Savannah Rhoda Sterling, 42 years old and trained for perfection. I'd chosen the flowers, the menu, even the exact shade of gold ribbon for his Rolex gift. A decade of marriage had taught me how to please him, or at least how to avoid his silence. I walked down the grand staircase with the envelope in my hand, a $100,000 $1,000 donation I'd made in his name to a children's foundation. It wasn't just charity. It was my love language, written in dollar signs he could admire in public. The dining room was empty, but faint laughter drifted from the parlor. His laughter. I smiled instinctively, thinking he was on the phone. Then I heard her voice. His mother, Evelyn Sterling. "Marcus," she said, her tone soaked in scornful laughter. "Do you really expect me to believe you still touch that woman?" And Marcus's reply sliced through the air like cold steel. "That fat cow disgusts me. Mom, I only care about her money. What did you think? That I enjoy pretending?" I didn't move. My heart didn't even have time to break. It just stopped. Evelyn's response came quickly, sharp and confident. "Then pretend better. Keep her happy until she signs everything over. After that, you know what to do." Their laughter rang out again, casual, rehearsed, cruel. I felt the envelope slip from my fingers. It hit the carpet soundlessly. For a moment, my house, felt like a theater stage, and I was the fool who didn't know the play was about her. I didn't cry. Not yet. I just stood there, silent, watching the morning light slide across the marble floor like nothing had happened. Then I turned, one step at a time, climbing the stairs as if I were sleepwalking. Inside my room, everything looked the same, my reflection, my perfume bottles, the expensive sheets. But nothing was the same anymore. When I finally sat on the bed, my body shook, not from grief, but from a clarity I'd never felt before. They'd shown me exactly who they were, and soon I'd show them who I really was. That night, we ate dinner like nothing happened. Marcus bragged about campaign donors. Evelyn commented that I should try her friend's new diet. They laughed. And I smiled not out of kindness, but calculation. After midnight, Marcus fell asleep. I wandered barefoot through the house, the same corridors I once thought were my kingdom. Now, they felt like prison walls lined with chandeliers. I stood in the study and looked at our wedding photo. Two perfect strangers smiling for the camera. Then I took a sheet of paper, wrote 6 simple words. "Thanks for showing your true colors," and folded it neatly. By dawn, I had already wired the family accounts into a private offshore trust. Every investment, every property, every drop of my inheritance, my training in finance, the same skill Marcus used to brag about, was now my weapon. At 5 a.m., I walked out of that mansion without a sound. No luggage, no diamonds, no note on the door. Just that folded paper on his pillow. 2 hours later, when Marcus woke, he shouted my name through the empty house. He called my phone disconnected, checked every room empty. He found only the note. Read it once, twice, 3 times. He didn't understand, not yet, but he would, because what he thought was power was mine all along. He just never realized I'd learned to stop loving him long before I learned to stop fearing him. The jasmine scent lingered in the hall as the sunlight touched the stairs I had once descended for his pleasure. This time, I had climbed them for my freedom. When I finally looked back at the mansion from the taxi window, it didn't feel like home. It felt like a mausoleum. Every chandelier, every velvet curtain, every marble stair had been bought to silence me, and now they would keep echoing without me. I didn't cry. I thought I would, but my tears had burned out long ago. You can only mourn something while you still believe it was real. The driver asked if I was going far. Just away, I said. He nodded. Maybe he'd heard that kind of answer before. At the train station, I kept my head down. No heels, no makeup, no diamond ring. I bought a one-way ticket to Chicago under a name that wasn't mine, Maya Solar. I didn't even think. The name came to me like an instinct, a rebirth in syllables. Somewhere between New York and Pennsylvania, as the train hummed through the gray dawn, I opened my notebook, the same one I used to write shopping lists for Marcus's fundraisers, and scribbled a line that would become my mantra. You don't lose yourself all at once. You hand yourself over, piece by piece, until you're gone. That's what I had done for 10 years. I'd handed over my laughter first, then my dreams, then my name, until there was nothing left of Savannah Rhodes except a shadow in a designer dress. By the time the train crossed into Illinois, I wasn't Savannah anymore. She was gone, buried under her own silence. When I arrived in South Shore, Chicago, it was raining the way cities rain hard and uncaring. The streets shimmered with puddles that mirrored neon signs and broken windows. A man was playing a trumpet under a streetlight, his music slow and aching. It smelled of fried food, gasoline, and survival. I found a notice taped to a chain-link fence, room for rent, shared bath, no questions. No questions. Perfect. The woman who opened the door was in her 60s, sharp eyes, cigarette dangling from her lips. You work? She asked. Not yet. Pay up front. Yes. She looked me up and down, my coat too clean, my speech too precise. Name. I hesitated for half a second. Maya Solar. She squinted, but nodded. Fine. Cash only. No noise. No trouble. The room was tiny, one twin bed, one flickering bulb, one window sealed with tape. It smelled of mildew and dust, but to me, it was freedom. That night, I lay on the hard mattress and stared at the cracked ceiling. Somewhere outside, a siren wailed. I smiled faintly. When you've lived your whole life pretending to be happy, there's a strange kind of joy in finally feeling nothing. In the morning, I went for a walk. The neighborhood was alive in a way Greenwich never was messy, loud, human. Kids played with chalk on the sidewalk. A woman sold tamales from a cart. Men argued good-naturedly over a basketball game. I stopped by a small community health clinic. The sign was faded. The door barely hung on its hinges. Inside, chaos boxes of medicine stacked on the floor, paperwork everywhere, a young man arguing with a tired nurse. That's when I saw him. Tall, dark-haired, sleeves rolled up, exhaustion under his eyes, but kindness in his voice. Elijah Vance, the nurse whispered to someone nearby. He's been working double shifts all week. I don't know why I stayed. Maybe it was the way he spoke to a scared patient, calm, gentle, no arrogance. He looked like someone who had lost too much but refused to stop caring. When the crowd thinned, I approached him. Dr. Vance. He turned. Yes. Are you here for an appointment? No, I said. I'd like to help. He looked me over, puzzled. Help how? I can organize, manage supplies, coordinate donations. I have experience. He frowned. Volunteers usually start by cleaning rooms. Then I'll clean, I said. Something in my tone made him pause. Finally. He nodded. Fine. But don't expect a paycheck. I'm not here for money. He gave me a half smile. Then you're already rare around here. That afternoon, I swept floors, folded stained sheets, and sorted dusty boxes of expired medicine. For the first time in years, my hands were doing something real. There's a strange kind of therapy in exhaustion. When you're scrubbing, you can't think about betrayal. You can only breathe. By evening, I was bone-tired but lighter. Elijah passed me a bottle of water. You work hard, yeah, he said. Old habit. I replied. He raised an eyebrow. You sound like someone who used to run things. I smiled faintly. I used to run a house that didn't feel like mine. He didn't press. He just said, well, this place could use someone who cares. That night, I walked home through the drizzle, my shoes soaked, my heart strangely calm. I stopped by a corner food truck for ribs. The man handed me a plate and said, "First one's on the house. You look like you've had a long week." I smiled. More like a long decade. He laughed. Ain't that the truth for all of us? Sometimes, healing doesn't announce itself. It just shows up disguised as ordinary kindness. Back in my tiny room, I opened my notebook and wrote another line. You can't rebuild a life on revenge. You can only rebuild it on truth. The next morning, I woke up before sunrise, and for the first time in years, I wanted to see what the day would bring. There's a certain beauty in anonymity, that strange peace that comes when no one expects anything from you. Back in Greenwich, I'd been a name on invitations, a hostess on display, a wife rehearsed to perfection. But here, in South Shore, I was just Maya. No one knew that I'd once sat beside senators and CEOs. No one cared that my jewelry was real gold. And honestly, neither did I anymore. Every morning, I walked the few blocks to the clinic, breathing in the scent of fried dough and bus fumes. The sidewalks were cracked, uneven, and alive. Street vendors shouted, dogs barked, kids darted through traffic. The chaos felt like medicine. At the clinic, Elijah was always there before sunrise, hair disheveled, shirt untucked, coffee in hand. He never looked like the kind of man who cared about appearances, and maybe that's why I trusted him almost immediately. "Maya," he'd say, smiling softly, "you organizing us again today. Someone has to," I'd tease. He chuckled once, the kind of quiet laugh that seemed to come from a tired place inside him. "You ever notice hospitals run better when women take charge?" "Always," I said, "but they only admit it when they need us." That made him grin, and in that fleeting moment, I saw a glimpse of warmth behind all that weariness. I learned quickly that South Shore wasn't broken. It was just bruised. There were mothers raising kids alone, elders keeping the neighborhood alive through sheer stubbornness, teenagers who carried their siblings more often than their school books. People survived here not through wealth, but through each other. One afternoon, a little girl walked in holding an older woman's hand. She couldn't have been more than 8 big brown eyes, frizzy hair tied with a faded ribbon. The woman, Miss Della, explained that the child hadn't eaten in days, her skin turning pale, her energy gone. Elijah took her hand gently. "What's your name, sweetheart?" "Lena," she whispered. He smiled. "That's a beautiful name." While he examined her, I stood nearby, holding a clipboard I wasn't really using. The girl's eyes, they reminded me of someone, maybe me, when I was still small enough to believe the world was kind. After the appointment, Elijah stepped into the hallway. His expression was serious, his voice low. "She needs tests. I'm worried it might be leukemia." The word hit me like a punch. I hadn't expected to care so much about a child I'd just met. He sighed. "But the labs cost money, more than they have." I looked through the glass window where Lena sat, gently brushing the hair of a one-armed doll. "Then we'll find a way," I said. Elijah looked at me long, measuring. "You're not from around here, are you?" I froze. "What makes you think that?" He shrugged. "Your hands, your accent. People here don't say we'll find a way. They say we'll try. You sound like someone who's used to making things happen." I forced a small smile. Maybe I just believe in trying harder. He didn't press, but I could tell he noticed more than he let on. Over the next few weeks, the clinic became my world. I organized donation drives, cleaned floors, and comforted patients who couldn't afford comfort anywhere else. My hands grew rough, my nails broke, my back ached, and I loved every minute of it. There was something holy about exhaustion when it came from helping people instead of pretending to be perfect. At night in my room, I wrote in my notebook, "Riches don't protect you from loneliness. Sometimes they feed it." I remembered the sound of Evelyn's laughter that day in the parlor, The way Marcus's voice dripped with contempt. They had called me a fat cow, a bag of regrets. But here, in this tiny, cluttered clinic, people looked me in the eye and saw a person, not a paycheck. One evening, as the sun dipped low, I was sorting medical files when Miss Della came to me. "Maya," she said softly, "you've got strong hands." I laughed. "They don't look like it." "Oh, no," she said, smiling faintly. "I don't mean strong from work. I mean strong from pain. I can see it in how you carry yourself." I hesitated. "You think pain can make someone strong?" "Child," she said, leaning on her cane, "pain doesn't make you strong. It shows you who you've been pretending to be. Then you choose who to become next." That night, I thought about her words until sleep took me. The next morning, I found Elijah sitting outside the clinic, head bowed, cigarette in hand. He wasn't a smoker, at least. Not often. "Rough night?" I asked him. He gave a tired half smile. "You could say that. You want to talk about it?" He hesitated, then sighed. "I used to work at a big hospital. Private, expensive. One of my patients died because the board didn't approve an emergency procedure, too costly. They said. I spoke up. They fired me, labeled me uncooperative." He laughed bitterly. "Now I'm here, patching up bullet wounds with duct tape." "Maybe," I said softly, "you're exactly where you're meant to be." He looked at me then, like no one had ever said that to him before. "Maybe," he whispered. Later that day, Lena came running up to me, holding something behind her back. "I made this for you," she said shyly, and pulled out a red bracelet made of string. "It's for luck," she said. "You look like you need it." I laughed, blinking back tears. "Do I?" She nodded solemnly. Grown-ups who smile too much usually do. Children have a strange way of seeing the truth we work so hard to hide. That night, I placed the bracelet beside my notebook. Its color reminded me of fire, not destruction, but rebirth. I wasn't sure what tomorrow would bring, but for the first time in a long time, I wanted to find out. The days began to blend together in South Shore, not in the way time melts when you're bored, but in the quiet rhythm of rebuilding a life. Each morning had a pulse, the sound of kids running down cracked sidewalks, the hum of distant trains, the chatter of women hanging laundry while trading neighborhood gossip like currency. And every morning, I walked past them unnoticed, just another woman with a paper bag of groceries and a secret heavy enough to bend her shoulders. At the clinic, the chaos was its own kind of harmony. Elijah's voice echoed down the hallway, calm but firm, as he directed volunteers, fixed broken equipment, and fought with insurance companies that didn't even remember South Shore existed. I learned the small things that kept the place alive, how to restock gauze before he ran out mid-procedure, how to translate the angry cries of a mother who spoke no English, how to stretch a $5 donation into enough supplies for a week. And somehow, between the laughter, the exhaustion, and the smell of disinfectant, I started to belong. It's strange belonging. For years, I was surrounded by people who knew my name but never saw me. Now I was surrounded by people who didn't even know who I was, and yet they truly saw me. One afternoon, Lena came to the clinic again, holding her grandmother's hand. Her skin was paler now, her eyes heavier. Elijah frowned the moment he saw her. "We need to talk," he said quietly after the exam. The test results came back. I knew before he said it. You can see it in a doctor's eyes, that unbearable kindness when the truth will hurt. "It's leukemia," he whispered. The word hung in the air like smoke. Miss Della let out a faint sob. Lena looked confused. I felt the ground tilt beneath me. Elijah rubbed his temples. "She'll need treatment immediately, but the hospital wants an upfront payment. We don't have that kind of money." "How much?" I asked. He told me the number, and it was worse than I expected, the kind of sum that could drown hope before it even began. Miss Della broke down. "She's all I have," she murmured. I placed my hand over hers. "We'll find a way," I said. Elijah looked at me sharply. "Maya?" "I said we'll find a way," I repeated. He stared at me, not with disbelief, but with something closer to curiosity, maybe even suspicion. Like a man realizing the woman beside him was made of something more than quiet courage. That night, I couldn't sleep. I lay awake listening to the ceiling fan click and groan. My hands trembled with anger, not at fate, but at the memory of every useless luxury I'd once owned. There were nights I had spent 5 figures on a dinner party centerpiece, while children like Lena had gone without medicine. The thought made me sick. I opened my backpack and pulled out a small velvet pouch, the last thing I owned from my old life. Inside was a sapphire ring, deep blue, cold as winter. It had belonged to my grandmother, a woman who believed strength meant never showing pain. That ring was worth more than everything in my room combined, maybe more than the entire clinic. I clenched it in my fist. "Not anymore," I whispered. The next morning, I took the early bus downtown. The pawnshop owner tried to haggle. I didn't let him. I knew exactly what it was worth. I walked out with a check large enough to buy Lena's chance at life. When I handed the envelope to Elijah that afternoon, he didn't ask questions. He just looked at me with eyes that saw too much and said, "You're full of surprises, Maya." I smiled faintly. "So are you, Doctor." He tilted his head. "Do you ever miss where you came from?" "Only the parts that never really existed." He nodded slowly. "Then maybe this is where you were meant to end up." A week later, Lena began treatment. It was brutal, the kind of pain no child should endure. Some days she cried until her voice disappeared. Other days, she just held my hand and whispered stories to her doll, pretending everything was normal. I stayed by her side every night. I wiped her forehead, read her fairy tales, hummed songs I hadn't sung since I was little. One evening, when the clinic was quiet, she looked at me and said, "You smile with your mouth, but not with your eyes." I froze. She reached up, tiny fingers brushing my cheek. "You're sad like me, but you don't tell anyone." I laughed softly. "Maybe you're too smart for your age." She shrugged. "People say that means you've seen too much. I think it just means we notice what others don't. Children always know. They don't need explanations, they just see." I wanted to tell her the truth right then, that I wasn't Maya, that I used to be someone else, someone who once drowned in diamonds. But she wouldn't understand, and maybe she didn't need to. That night, I found Elijah sitting outside again, staring at the city skyline. He looked older, the kind of tired that medicine can't fix. "You ever think about leaving?" I asked. He smiled faintly. "Every night. And then I remember I wouldn't know where else to go. Maybe home." He shook his head. "Home's gone. My wife died. Misdiagnosed pneumonia. A private hospital. They hid their mistake behind legal walls and apologies. So I left everything and came here. The irony. I save strangers now because I couldn't save the one person who mattered." I sat beside him in silence. There are no words that can fix that kind of wound. Finally, he glanced at me. "You've lost someone too, haven't you?" I met his gaze and smiled, soft but steady. "Yes, myself." He didn't ask more. Maybe he understood that some losses are invisible. Before heading home, I stopped by Lena's bed. She was asleep, breathing unevenly, her bracelet of red thread still tied around her wrist. I touched it gently and whispered, "You're stronger than you know." Then I walked out into the night, the city air thick with rain and the faint hum of distant sirens. And for the first time since leaving Greenwich, I realized I wasn't running anymore. I was fighting. I woke up before sunrise that morning, though it felt like I hadn't truly slept in weeks. The fan spun lazily above me, its motor humming in uneven breaths, almost in rhythm with my own. My body was exhausted, but my mind was a battlefield. Lena's treatment had begun, and though the doctor said there was hope, I had learned how cruelly that word could lie. Hope, I thought, is like perfume, beautiful at first, but it fades too quickly if you cling too tight. I dressed quietly, folding the blanket as if tidiness could hold me together, and walked to the clinic early. The streets were still half asleep, the sky a bruised violet. A man swept the sidewalk outside his shop, his broom scraping the concrete with a steady rhythm. Somewhere nearby, Gospel music spilled faintly from a kitchen window. It was Sunday, the day Marcus used to parade me into church like I was part of his campaign, a well-dressed wife, silent and smiling. The memory made my stomach turn. When I reached the clinic, Elijah was already there, sitting behind the reception desk, his hair damp from an early shower. He looked up and smiled, though it didn't reach his eyes. "You didn't sleep," he said. "Neither did you," I replied. He exhaled slowly. "You ever feel like you're living two lives at once?" I hesitated. "Every day." He didn't ask which life I meant, the one I was living now or the one I left behind. He just handed me a clipboard. "We're short on gloves again. I'll make calls. You handle inventory." That quiet understanding between us, it was becoming something I both craved and feared. The morning went by fast. Patients came and went, each one a reminder of how fragile life could be. A teenage boy with a bullet wound, a mother coughing blood into a paper napkin, a factory worker who hadn't smiled in months. And between them, I saw Lena frail, pale, but stubbornly alive. She'd drawn a small picture of me and Elijah on a scrap of paper. "See?" she said proudly. "You're the one with the messy bun." Elijah laughed. "That's pretty accurate." I smiled, touched her cheek. "And where's you?" "Right here." She pointed to a stick figure in the middle, surrounded by what looked like sunshine. "She put herself between us," Elijah murmured. "Smart girl," I whispered. "That's where the light belongs." That afternoon, while sorting supplies in the back office, the clinic phone rang. Elijah answered, his tone casual at first, then changing sharply. "Yes, this is Dr. Vance," he said. A pause. "Who did you say?" Another pause. "Sterling. You're sure?" My blood froze. Elijah's eyes darted to me sharp, questioning. He turned his body slightly away as if to protect me from whatever the voice on the other end was saying. When the call ended, he hung up slowly, his fingers trembling just enough to notice. "What was that?" I asked. He hesitated, scanning my face. Just an old case file, a name I hadn't heard in years. Sterling. His silence was an answer. The air between us thickened. My heart pounded like a drum in my ears. "Do you know them?" he asked finally. His tone careful, almost gentle. I shook my head. "No, the name sounds familiar." He didn't believe me. I could see it in his eyes. But he didn't press either. He just nodded. Slowly. Sometimes ghosts have a way of calling us even when we've buried them deep. And I knew then my ghosts were clawing their way back. That night, I walked home under a thin drizzle. The streetlights glowed like tired eyes, and the air smelled of wet concrete and fried chicken. I passed the food truck man again. "You look like you've seen a ghost," he said with a grin. "Maybe I have," I replied. He chuckled. "Well, tell it it's too late for barbecue." I laughed, but only halfway. The truth was, I could feel Marcus somewhere out there circling, searching. When I reached my room, I sat on the edge of my bed and stared at the cracked mirror. The reflection that looked back wasn't Savannah Rhodes. It wasn't even Maya Solar. It was someone in between, someone I hadn't yet named. I pulled out my notebook and wrote, "Fear doesn't disappear. You just learn to walk beside it without letting it lead." I closed the book and turned off the light. The city murmured outside, the sound of tires on wet pavement blending with distant laughter. And for the first time since hearing my husband call me disgusting, I whispered to the darkness, "I'm not done yet." The next day, Miss Della stopped me outside the clinic. She had that look the one old women wear when they know something before you do. "You're carrying something heavy," she said. "We all are," I replied. She shook her head. "No, child, yours ain't grief. It's guilt." I froze. "I don't need to know the story," she continued softly. "But listen, guilt is just love with no place to go. Find somewhere for it. Don't let it rot inside you." That night, I couldn't stop thinking about her words. Maybe that's why I started staying later at the clinic, cleaning, organizing, dreaming. I began sketching plans for something, a shelter, maybe a place for women like me, women who'd been called names behind closed doors, who'd been told they were too much or not enough. I wanted to build something that said, "You are enough." In my notebook, I drew a circle and wrote in the center, the Maya Solar Foundation. I didn't know yet how I'd do it, but I knew I would. Because when the world takes everything from you, your name, your home, your dignity, what you build next becomes your revenge. The idea for the foundation started as a whisper, the kind you almost ignore because it feels too big to say out loud. But every day, that whisper grew louder, like a steady heartbeat beneath all the noise of South Shore. I'd sweep the clinic floors or sort through medical donations, and I'd catch myself imagining a place of our own, a clean, warm space where women could breathe again. A refuge for anyone who had been told she was nothing. I didn't want to just heal wounds anymore. I wanted to build something that prevented them. Elijah noticed the change in me. One evening, after we closed, he leaned against the doorway and said, "You've been walking around like a woman with a secret mission." I smiled. "Maybe I have." "You want to tell me what it is?" I hesitated. "A place, a foundation for women who lost everything: money, trust, hope. A place where they can rebuild without shame." He studied me for a long moment. "That's ambitious, beautiful, but expensive." "I know. You have experience running something like that." "I have experience losing everything," I said softly. "That counts for something." He didn't ask more, just nodded and said, "If you start it, I'll help." I don't think he realized what that promise meant to me. Days passed in a blur of exhaustion and quiet joy. Lena's condition was holding steady some good days, some bad, but her spirit was stronger than her body. Every time I visited her, she'd have another picture for me. One afternoon, she handed me a drawing of a house with sunflowers painted on the walls. "That's our new home," she said proudly. "You, me, and Dr. Elijah." I laughed. "You think we all fit in one house?" "It's a big one," she said, "and nobody there is sad." Her words hit me deeper than I expected. Children have a way of saying things that sound simple but pierce the soul. That weekend, South Shore held its annual community fair, an event where people sold crafts, old clothes, and home-cooked food to raise money for the clinic. I decided to take charge of organizing it, channeling every ounce of the control I once used to manage black tie galas. This time, though, I wasn't hosting for status. I was hosting for survival. I went door to door, convincing the women to bake, sew, and paint. I borrowed folding tables, strung lights between buildings, and somehow made it look festive. When the fair opened, the air buzzed with music and laughter. Miss Della walked by with a tray of sweet potato pies and muttered, "I don't know who you were before, Maya, but whoever you are now, this place needed you." For the first time in years, I didn't feel like an imposter. I felt right. Elijah joined me near sunset, his sleeves rolled up, his face lit by the orange glow of string lights. "You did all this?" he asked, almost in awe. "We did," I corrected him. "Everyone helped." He nodded, smiling. "You've got that look again." "What look?" "The one that says you're starting over, whether the world likes it or not." I laughed. Maybe I am. We stood there for a while, watching children dance and neighbors share food. It wasn't luxury, it was life. And that's when I heard a voice I hadn't expected to hear again. "Dr. Vance." I turned. Elijah's face changed. The nurse from the clinic was running toward him, holding a phone. "It's the hospital. About that old case they found the documents. The patient's name was Evelyn Sterling." The name hit like ice water. Evelyn, my mother-in-law. The woman who had laughed while her son called me disgusting. Elijah frowned, turning to me. "You okay? You look pale." I forced a smile, just a little dizzy, but my heart was sprinting inside my chest. I mumbled something about needing air and walked away before he could ask more. I found a quiet alley behind the fairgrounds where the music was just a distant hum. My hands shook. I gripped the wall to steady myself. Why that name? Why now? I took deep breaths, counting backward like my therapist once taught me. "You're safe," I whispered. "You're gone. They can't touch you anymore." But deep down, I wasn't sure if that was true. Later that night, I climbed onto the roof of my building. The city stretched out before me, endless lights, endless stories, the kind of beauty you only notice after losing everything. Miss Della joined me quietly, a bag of leftover pie in her hand. "I figured you hadn't eaten," she said. "Thank you." She sat beside me. "You looked like a woman remembering something tonight." "Maybe I was." She nodded slowly. "You ever notice how some memories don't fade? They just wait, like weeds under the soil, quiet till the rain comes." I smiled faintly. "You always talk like that." "Only when I meet someone running from her past." Her words were gentle, but they hit hard. She handed me a slice of pie. "I don't need to know your secrets, Maya. But I'll tell you this, hiding who you are will kill you faster than any illness." I didn't answer. I just looked at the stars, faint, stubborn lights refusing to be drowned by the city's glow. The next morning, Elijah found me early at the clinic. "That name from last night, Evelyn Sterling, does it mean something to you?" My throat tightened. "No, I lied. Just sounded familiar." He looked unconvinced but didn't push. "She was one of my private patients years ago. Her son threatened me after I refused to cover up illegal prescriptions. They ruined my career. Evelyn, Marcus. It was all connected." I managed to keep my face neutral, but inside, my heart was screaming. When Elijah walked away, I leaned against the counter, gripping the edge until my knuckles turned white. Fate, it seemed, wasn't done with me yet. That night, I couldn't shake the feeling that something or someone was closing in on me. I had built this fragile, but quiet life brick by brick, and now the cracks were starting to show. I went to the clinic early the next morning, hoping work would drown the noise in my head. Elijah was already there, as usual, going through paperwork. He looked up as I entered, his eyes soft but weary. "Rough night?" he asked. I forced a smile. "You could say that." He gestured to a pile of files. "We've got our hands full. The pharmacy's late again, and the neighborhood's been hit with a flu wave. You ready for chaos?" "Chaos," I said, tying my hair back. "I can handle," but my mind wasn't on the flu, or the medicine, or the clinic at all. It was on the name, Evelyn Sterling. The woman who taught me silence by example, who had taught her son cruelty by habit, the woman who told him to use me, then discard me. What was she doing in his past? And more importantly, what else did Elijah know? By midday, the clinic was overflowing. I barely had time to breathe. Patients filled every hallway, every chair, every inch of the waiting room. Yet somewhere between the noise and exhaustion, I felt oddly alive. Elijah and I worked like clockwork, a kind of unspoken rhythm between us. I knew what he needed before he asked. He knew when to pull me aside before I collapsed. "Go drink some water," he said at one point, tapping the counter. "You're pale again." "I'm fine." "Maya, you're never fine when you say you're fine." He smiled, but there was worry beneath it. That kind of look from a man who's seen enough loss to recognize the signs. I poured myself a cup of water, my hands trembling slightly. Through the window, I saw Lena in the corner, sitting with her doll, humming softly. Despite the tubes, despite the fatigue, she still smiled. It humbled me. Children have a way of making survival look effortless. That evening, when most patients had gone home, Elijah found me sitting alone in the supply room, staring at a single medical file. "Maya," he said softly, "you've been miles away all day." I didn't look up. "Do you ever feel like your past is waiting for you to blink?" He leaned against the wall, all the time. But if I've learned anything, it's that the past loses power when you finally stop running from it. I met his eyes. "And if running is all you've ever known..." He didn't answer right away. Then he said, "Then maybe it's time to walk towards something instead." He smiled faintly, but I could see it, the understanding, the quiet awareness that my lies were starting to fray. When I got home that night, Miss Della was waiting on the porch, rocking slowly in her chair. The streetlight behind her flickered like a candle. "I heard you didn't eat," she said. "I made you soup." I smiled. "You don't have to keep feeding me." "Honey," she said, her voice low and warm, "I'm not feeding you. I'm watching over you. There's a difference. I sat beside her, taking the bowl. The broth was simple chicken, rice, and something that tasted like kindness. After a long silence, she said, "You've been trembling lately. You waiting for something to find you?" I froze. Spoon halfway to my lips. "Why do you say that?" "Because people who run carry it in their shoulders. Yours are tight as rope." She turned her gaze toward the street, her eyes unreadable. "When I was your age, I ran too, from a husband who thought I was his shadow. You can hide from people, but not from the version of yourself that still remembers their hands." Her words hit deep, almost too deep. I put down the bowl. "I'm not running anymore." She nodded. "Then stop looking over your shoulder like you are." The next day, while the clinic buzzed with noise, Elijah called me into the back office. There was a folder open on his desk, a name circled in red ink. "Maya." He began carefully. "I want to tell you something. That woman, Evelyn Sterling, the one from the old file, she and her son were involved in a string of corruption cases, the kind of people who destroy lives to protect their image." My throat tightened. He continued, "Years ago, I refused to forge medical records for her. She threatened to ruin me, and she did." I swallowed. "And her son?" He looked down. "A politician, charming, ruthless. I never met him, but his name came up a lot, Marcus Sterling." My heart dropped. He looked up at me. "You're trembling again." I forced a smile. "It's just familiar, that name." He leaned forward, eyes sharp but kind. "Maya, whatever you're hiding, you don't have to keep it buried. Not here, not with me." I wanted to tell him everything, about the mansion, the laughter behind the door, the note I left on the pillow, about the woman I used to be and the ghost I'd become, but the words stayed trapped in my throat. "I can't," I whispered. He didn't push, he just nodded. "Then when you're ready, I'll still be here." That night, I went back to the half-renovated warehouse I'd secretly bought under my new name. The place was dusty and empty, but to me it felt sacred, like standing in the skeleton of a dream. I ran my hands over the cold bricks. One day, I murmured, "This will be a place where no woman feels small." I wrote a line in my notebook before leaving. Sometimes freedom doesn't come from leaving. It comes from staying long enough to rebuild. Outside, the wind howled through the empty streets. I pulled my coat tighter and started walking home, unaware of the black car idling a few blocks away, headlights dimmed, engine silent. Inside it sat a man with dark hair, tired eyes, and a photo of me on the dashboard. Marcus Sterling whispered to himself, "Found you." The next morning started like any other gray sky. Sirens in the distance, the hum of life rising from South Shore's streets, but something in the air felt heavier, sharper. Maybe it was instinct, or maybe it was the memory of the life I thought I'd buried starting to claw its way back. I walked to the clinic, clutching my coat tighter than usual. Every sound made me flinch, a door slamming, a horn blaring. It was ridiculous, I told myself. Marcus couldn't be here. He wouldn't risk it. But deep down, I knew Marcus had never cared about risk, only control. Inside the clinic, everything looked deceptively normal. Elijah was scribbling notes, Lena was laughing faintly from her bed, and Miss Della was fussing with paperwork like a drill sergeant in an apron. The smell of antiseptic mixed with coffee grounds. It felt safe, at least for a few hours. Around noon, Elijah handed me a clipboard and said, "We're low on gauze and antiseptic. Could you grab some from the pharmacy down the block?" Of course. He smiled that calm, steady smile that somehow made the world feel bearable. "Be careful out there. It's colder today." I nodded, pulling up my hood before stepping outside. The city was overcast, the kind of muted afternoon that made colors fade. I crossed the street, weaving between vendors and kids playing soccer with a crushed soda can. That's when I saw it. A black SUV parked at the corner, tinted windows, idling quietly. My stomach turned. I didn't need to see his face. I felt it. "Marcus." My breath quickened. I ducked into an alley without thinking, my shoes splashing through puddles. I turned another corner, then another, until the streets blurred together. I finally stopped behind an abandoned storefront, leaning against the wall, trying to slow my heartbeat. Don't panic, Savannah. Not now. I forced myself to breathe slow, deliberate, just like my therapist had once taught me. I counted to 10. Then I peeked around the corner. The SUV was still there, unmoving. Maybe I was wrong. Maybe it wasn't him. But my gut, my mother's gut, the one that knows danger before logic does, whispered otherwise. By the time I returned to the clinic, Elijah noticed immediately. "You okay?" "Yeah," I lied, my voice steadier than I felt. Just thought someone was following me. His eyes darkened. "You sure?" I nodded quickly, avoiding his gaze. "It's probably nothing." He stepped closer. "You know you can tell me if something's wrong, right?" I met his eyes and saw something there I hadn't expected: fear. Not for himself, but for me. That scared me more than the SUV did. That night, I didn't go home right away. I stayed at the clinic, sitting beside Lena's bed as she slept. Her little hand rested on mine, warm and fragile. "You're my family," she'd whispered earlier before dozing off. Her words echoed in my head now. Family. The word had always been poisoned for me, a word that used to mean control, obligation, and shame. But here, it was something different. Something real. When she stirred in her sleep, I whispered, "I won't let anyone hurt you, baby. Not anyone." And I meant it. It was close to midnight when I finally stepped outside. The streets were empty, washed in pale orange from the streetlights. I walked fast, cutting through alleys to avoid the main road. But when I reached my block, the world went still. The same black SUV sat parked across from my building, engine off, headlights dead, but it was there like a shadow that had been waiting. I froze. My hands began to tremble. The driver's side door opened. A man stepped out, tall, in a dark coat, his hair shorter than before, but unmistakable. "Marcus." He spotted me instantly. "Savannah," he said, his voice slicing through the night air. I turned and ran, not like a dignified woman like prey. My boots pounded against the pavement, breath ragged. I darted between trash cans, down narrow alleys slick with rainwater. Behind me, I heard footsteps, steady and close. "Savannah," he called again, louder this time. "You can't hide forever." I didn't look back. I reached the end of the alley, a brick wall, dead end. Panic clawed at me, but before I could turn, I heard tires screeching, then silence. The footsteps stopped. When I turned, the alley was empty, the SUV gone. Had he decided to wait instead? Was he testing me? I pressed a shaking hand against the wall, whispering to myself, "You got out once. You can do it again." By the time I got back to my room, my body was shaking so badly I could barely hold my keys. I locked the door twice and collapsed onto the bed. For the first time in months, I cried. Not the quiet, graceful kind, the ugly kind, the kind that comes from the bones. It wasn't fear of Marcus finding me that broke me. It was realizing how close I was to losing everything again. Freedom isn't permanent. It's something you have to keep earning, breath by breath. When the tears finally stopped, I sat up and opened my notebook. My handwriting was shaky, but I wrote anyway. You can't rebuild your life if you keep running from its ruins. I looked at the words for a long time before underlining them twice. Then I wiped my eyes and whispered, "Tomorrow, I fight back." At dawn, I went straight to the warehouse, my secret project, my dream, my redemption. The rising sun spilled through the broken windows, painting the walls gold. I stood in the center of the room, closed my eyes, and said aloud, "You took my home once, Marcus. You won't take this." It was time to stop hiding. I would finish the foundation. I would make it official. I would give this place my name, Savannah Rhodes. Because sometimes the only way to kill a ghost is to speak its name again. The next morning, I felt something I hadn't felt in years resolve. Not the kind that comes from anger, but the kind born of exhaustion. You get tired of hiding. You get tired of being scared. And one day, you just stop. That was me. I dressed simply, tied my hair back, and walked straight to the community records office. The woman behind the counter looked up, unimpressed, as if she'd seen 1,000 desperate faces before mine. "I'd like to register a foundation," I said. She blinked. "You got a name?" "Yes." I took a deep breath. "The Maya Solar Foundation." She smiled faintly. "Pretty name. Sounds like sunlight." "That's the idea." I signed the papers with steady hands, the name Maya Solar, curling across the page in firm strokes. It wasn't my birth name, but it was the one I had earned. When I left the office, the wind was cold but clean. I walked faster than usual, my heart light for the first time in months. For a few moments, I allowed myself to believe I was safe, until I saw the newspaper stand. Right there on the front page, political scandal explodes Marcus Sterling, accused of embezzlement and fraud. His photo stared back at me, smiling that perfect campaign smile, but I could see the panic behind it. The article mentioned missing funds, offshore accounts, anonymous reports. Anonymous. A slow, dangerous smile crept across my face. Sometimes justice doesn't need a courtroom. Sometimes it just needs one well-timed email. Back at the clinic, Elijah was pacing, reading the same article on his phone. When he saw me, his eyes widened. "Maya, did you see this?" "I did." He hesitated. "You look calm." "Maybe I'm just tired of watching bad men win." He studied me carefully. "You knew him, didn't you, Marcus Sterling?" I froze, then laughed softly. "Why would you think that?" "Because every time I've said that name, you've looked like someone hearing thunder before the storm." He stepped closer. "Tell me the truth." "Maya, who are you?" I wanted to lie. God, I wanted to. But something in his voice, not anger, not suspicion, just quiet understanding made me stop. So I did what I hadn't done for anyone. I told him everything. About Marcus, the marriage, the betrayal, the money, the note. About the mansion and the laughter and the way I walked away without looking back. When I finished, Elijah didn't speak right away. He just stared at me with eyes full of both shock and admiration. "You're Savannah Rodas," he whispered. "Yes." He let out a long breath and leaned against the wall. "I treated your mother-in-law, you know, Evelyn Sterling, years ago." I nodded. "I know." His voice was barely above a whisper. "She destroyed my career. You destroyed her sons. That's poetic in a way." I smiled sadly. "It's justice, not poetry." He looked at me for a long time, then said softly, "And now I build something. For every woman like me who had to lose everything before she could start living." He nodded slowly. "Then I'll help you." Over the next few weeks, the abandoned warehouse began to transform, with donations, leftover clinic supplies, and volunteer labor. Walls were repaired, floors scrubbed, windows replaced. Every evening, I stayed late, sweeping dust and painting walls, my hands blistered but my heart strong. Miss Della visited often, always with food. "You know," she said one night while watching me paint, "most people run from pain. You turned yours into a hammer." I smiled. Maybe it's the only tool I had left. Lena came by too, her little head covered with a pink scarf now. She'd lost more hair, but not her brightness. "Can I paint?" she asked one afternoon. Of course. She dipped her tiny brush into yellow paint and drew a crooked sun on the wall. "It's for you," she said. "So you don't forget to be happy." I felt tears sting my eyes. "You're the one teaching me that." But peace never lasts long when the past still has your scent. One rainy evening, Elijah found me sitting at my desk in the half-lit foundation office. "There's something you need to know," he said quietly. "What?" He hesitated. "Evelyn called me." My stomach dropped. "What?" "She asked to meet, said it was urgent, said it was about you." I froze. "Did you agree?" "Yes. I didn't want her reaching out to you directly. I'll meet her at a neutral place, a hotel downtown. You don't have to go." But I did have to. I needed to hear what she had to say. The part of me that still remembered her perf and her cruel laughter, her voice calling me a liability, that part wanted closure. "Elijah," I said quietly, "I'm coming with you." He started to protest, but I held up a hand. "She's the last ghost left. Let me finish it." The next afternoon, We met her at a faded old hotel off Michigan Avenue. When she entered the lobby, I almost didn't recognize her. Gone were the pearls, the tailored suits, the arrogance. She looked small, fragile, the kind of woman who'd finally realized her empire was built on sand. "Savannah," she said softly, "you look well." "I am," she sat, trembling slightly. "I didn't ask you here to apologize for Marcus. He's beyond saving." I folded my arms. Then why? Her eyes glistened. "Because I need to confess something before it's too late. Marcus isn't my biological son." I blinked. "What?" She swallowed hard. "I was assaulted at 18. I raised him as my own because I couldn't bear the shame. But I see now. He became the man who hurt me. Cruel. Empty. I kept the secret all these years, thinking I was protecting myself, but maybe I was protecting evil." Elijah sat frozen beside me. Evelyn continued, her voice breaking. "There's more. The girl Lena, her mother, might be connected. She was the daughter of the man who attacked me." I felt my blood run cold. "What are you saying?" "She could be Marcus's half-niece," Evelyn whispered. "I don't know for sure, but I thought you should." She reached for my hand. "Savannah, I can't undo what I did to you, but you can break this chain. Don't let him poison that child's future." I pulled my hand back, trembling. "You're decades too late." "Evelyn." She nodded, tears slipping down her cheeks. "I know, but maybe it's not too late for me." And then she left quietly, like someone fading into the night. Elijah and I sat in silence for a long time. When he finally spoke, his voice was low. "You okay?" I stared at the door she'd walked through and whispered, "No, but I will be." That night, I returned to the foundation. The lights flickered on, illuminating the fresh white walls and Lena's crooked yellow sun. I placed my hand over it and whispered, "It ends here. The pain, the shame, all of it." And for the first time, I felt peace. Not the fragile kind, the kind that stays. The following days passed in a quiet rhythm, the kind of calm that feels borrowed like the air before a storm. The foundation was nearly ready to open its doors, and I threw myself into every detail: paperwork, furniture, supplies, anything that could distract my mind from Evelyn's confessions. Still, it haunted me. If what she said was true, Lena wasn't just a patient, she was tangled in the same web of sin and secrecy that had shadowed my life for years. The daughter of a predator's daughter, the niece of the man who ruined me. Fate has a cruel sense of irony. But I'd made a decision long ago I would not let the sins of men define the innocence of children. That night, I stood in the half-lit corridor of the foundation, surrounded by boxes of donations, and whispered to the empty room, "Lena will have a better beginning than I ever did." The grand opening came faster than I expected. We didn't have fancy banners or politicians pretending to care, just the people who mattered: neighbors, mothers, volunteers, parents, and children. The air smelled of fresh paint and warm bread from Miss Della's kitchen. Lena, frail but glowing, held a pair of small scissors wrapped with red ribbon. Elijah crouched beside her, guiding her hands. "Ready?" he asked. She nodded. "I want to say something first." The crowd hushed. "This place," Lena said, her voice small but steady, "is for everyone who ever felt invisible. Miss Maya says that when people stop seeing you, you can still shine anyway. So this is for her and for all of us who need a place to shine." She cut the ribbon. Cheers erupted. And I cried. Not the quiet, controlled kind, the full, shaking kind that releases years of fear and forgiveness all at once. For a while, it felt like the universe had finally granted me peace. The foundation thrived. Women came seeking shelter, safety, a second chance. Some brought children, some brought nothing but tears. We gave them food, beds, and hope. Elijah and I worked side by side, our bond deepening without needing to define it. Sometimes he'd catch me staring at the sunrise through the cracked window, and he'd just smile as if he understood every word I never said. He had that gift, the quiet kind of love that didn't demand or rush. One evening, while closing up, he handed me a small wooden box. "What's this?" I asked. "Open it." Inside was a silver bracelet with a tiny charm shaped like a sun. "For Maya," he said softly. "For the woman who brought light into a place everyone forgot." I laughed through tears. "Elijah, I can't. You already did. You built this." I touched the charm. It was warm, as if it carried his heartbeat. You know, there's an old saying, the sun never asks for permission to shine. He chuckled. "You just made that up." "Maybe." I smiled, but it sounds wise, doesn't it? 2 weeks later, the piece cracked again. The story broke nationally. Marcus Sterling had been indicted. Wire fraud, embezzlement, corruption. Headlines screamed across every network, and in every report, my name appeared. Savannah Rodas, estranged wife and former heiress, believed to have assisted prosecutors with anonymous evidence. The news hit like wildfire. In one afternoon, my anonymity was gone. The neighborhood buzzed with whispers. Some pitied me, some admired me, others were just curious. At the clinic, a young nurse looked at me with wide eyes. "Miss Maya, are you really the one who disappeared?" I didn't answer. I didn't need to. Elijah closed the door to his office and leaned against it, exhaling hard. "They're going to come looking for you again. Reporters. Maybe worse. I'm not running this time." He frowned. "Savannah?" "No," I said, firmly now. "I've spent enough of my life running from who I am. If they want Savannah Rodas, they'll find her right here cleaning floors and saving lives." He smiled faintly. "You always did like poetic defiance." "I liked justice." I corrected him. That night, when the clinic was quiet, I found myself sitting by Lena's bedside again. She was asleep, breathing softly. Her cheeks were pale, her little fingers curled around the red bracelet she'd made me. I reached out and brushed her hair away from her forehead. "You're going to make it," I whispered. "You'll grow up knowing love, not fear." Then I stood and went to the window. Across the street, I spotted something, a silhouette leaning against a lamppost, a cigarette glowing faintly in the dark. "Marcus?" My heart didn't race this time. I just watched him, the shell of the man who once called me his lucky charm. His posture sagged, his suit wrinkled, his confidence gone. He didn't move toward me, just stared, maybe hoping I'd come out. But I didn't. Instead, I turned off the lights and whispered to myself, "You no longer scare me." When I looked again, the lamppost was empty. A week later, Evelyn came to the foundation. No chauffeur, no entourage, just an old woman in plain clothes carrying a brown envelope. "May I come in?" she asked quietly. I nodded. She looked around at the bright walls, the busy volunteers, the laughter of children. Her eyes filled with something I'd never seen in her before: humility. "I see now what I could have been if I'd chosen differently," she said. "You still can choose," I replied. She smiled faintly. "Maybe that's why I came." She handed me the envelope. Inside were legal papers, transfer of assets, properties, bank accounts, and all of it to the Maya Solar Foundation. I stared at her. "Why?" "Because redemption isn't a word," she said. "It's an action." She started to walk away, but I called after her, "Evelyn." She turned. "I forgive you." Tears spilled down her cheeks. "You shouldn't." "Maybe not," I said softly, "but I need to." She nodded once and left quietly, like smoke. That night, Elijah and I stood outside the foundation, looking up at the glowing sign, the Maya Solar Foundation. "Do you realize what you've done?" he asked. "I just gave away everything I had." He smiled. "No, you turned it into something that can't be taken back." We stood in silence for a while. Then I looked up at the stars and whispered, "You might not survive this one, Savannah, but you'll live." And for once, I believed it. The night after Evelyn's visit, I couldn't sleep. The sound of the ceiling fan groaning above me matched the steady pulse in my chest. My mind replayed her words, "Redemption is an action." It echoed like an old hymn. Outside, rain tapped against the windows of the foundation. South Shore was quiet, the way it always got before dawn, the kind of quiet that feels almost holy. I sat up in bed, reached for my journal, and began to write. Not about Marcus or Evelyn or even the betrayal. I wrote about grace, the fragile, unexpected kind that shows up long after you think you deserve it. Because for the first time, I understood something. Forgiveness isn't about setting them free. It's about freeing yourself from the need to watch them burn. The next morning, I was in the office when Elijah walked in. His eyes were serious. "We need to talk." He handed me a folder. Inside were scans from the hospital test results from the neurologist I'd seen weeks ago. I had known, of course. My hands had started trembling more often. My legs felt heavy some days, but seeing it written in black and white made it real. Amyotrophic lateral sclerosis, ALS. Slow, certain, unstoppable. I sat in silence for a long time. Then I closed the folder and whispered, "Well, life really does have a sense of humor." Elijah didn't smile. "Then how long?" "Maybe 2 years," I said softly. "If I'm lucky." He sat beside me. "We'll fight it." I shook my head. "No, Elijah, we'll use it." His brow furrowed. "What do you mean? I don't want my last years spent in hospitals or hiding from pity. I want to finish what we started. The foundation, the girls, Lena. I want to leave something that can't die with me." He looked down at his hands. "You shouldn't have to carry that alone." I smiled faintly. "You say that like I ever carried anything alone. You've been here the whole time." Weeks passed, each day more precious than the last. I poured myself into the foundation's work, long hours, constant motion, relentless purpose. My body weakened, but my spirit felt sharper, like a blade honed by pain. One afternoon, as I reviewed paperwork, Lena walked in wearing her little knitted hat. "Miss Maya," she said, "can I tell you a secret?" "Of course, sweetheart. I think when people die, they don't really go away. They just turn into wind so they can keep visiting." I swallowed hard, my throat tightening. "That's a beautiful thought." She nodded solemnly. "If you ever go away, I'll still feel you. The wind will tell me your stories." I couldn't speak. I just hugged her tight, breathing in the scent of her shampoo strawberry and hope. That night, I wrote in my journal, if the wind could speak, it would tell her I stayed. Meanwhile, the world outside was burning. Marcus's arrest had become a full-blown national scandal. Television networks replayed footage of him escorted in handcuffs, his face pale, defiant, broken. Evelyn's confession had leaked, turning the Sterling family name into a synonym for deceit. The man who once mocked me for my weight, for my silence, for my softness now stood before cameras stripped of everything, forced to answer for what he'd done. When the reporters shouted questions about me, he said nothing, just bowed his head. I watched it all from the clinic's waiting room, not with joy, but with something quieter. Finality. It was over. One evening, as the sun set over South Shore, Evelyn appeared again. She looked older, smaller, almost translucent in the fading light. "I wanted to see the place once more," she said softly. I led her inside. She walked slowly, running her fingers along the wall murals, children's drawings, women's names etched into bricks of gratitude. "I didn't think it was possible," she whispered, "to build something this beautiful out of so much pain." "It was possible because of that pain," I said. She nodded, then turned to me. "I know I don't deserve your forgiveness, Savannah." "Maybe not," I said gently, "but I'm giving it anyway. For me, not for you." Her eyes filled with tears. "Then let me give you something in return." From her purse, she pulled out a small box. Inside was a necklace gold, delicate, with a charm shaped like a compass. "It belonged to my mother," she said. "She gave it to me the day I left home, said, 'When you forget who you are, follow this.' I lost myself for years. Savannah, maybe now. It's time this found its way to someone who didn't." I hesitated, then took it. "Thank you." She smiled through trembling lips. "You always deserved better than us." And then she was gone. That night, Elijah and I sat on the rooftop, watching the city lights flicker. He handed me a cup of tea. "You know," he said softly, "the day you showed up here, I thought you were running from something small. Debt, maybe a bad marriage. I never imagined you were running from an empire." I laughed quietly. I wasn't running from it. Elijah, I was running toward myself. He reached over, took my hand. I'm glad you ran here. I looked at him, really looked at the man who had once lost his faith in medicine, who had been crushed by a system as cold as the one that destroyed me, and I realized something. We had both found our cure in each other. Elijah, I whispered, you once said you don't believe in miracles. He nodded. I still don't. Then maybe I'm your proof. He smiled, eyes glistening. You always were. Later that night, after he'd gone, I stood in the empty hallway, holding the compass necklace against my chest. The ticking of the wall clock echoed like a heartbeat. I looked up and whispered to the ceiling, if my time's running out, let it run out doing something that matters. And I knew what I had to do next. Tomorrow, I would finalize the paperwork. Every cent I still owned, every investment I'd hidden away, every property I could sell, all of it would belong to the Maya Solar Foundation. I'd been born into privilege and died into purpose. If that isn't redemption, I don't know what is. The day I signed everything over was bright, unnaturally bright for winter. The sunlight spilled through the wide windows of the foundation office like it was blessing the place. The attorney sat across from me, flipping through stacks of papers, unaware that every signature I placed was another piece of my past slipping away. This will officially transfer full ownership of your remaining asset, he said. Once filed, nothing can be reversed. That's the point, I replied, pen steady in my trembling hand. He glanced at me. You're certain? I've never been more certain of anything. Each stroke of ink felt like breathing a slow exhale of all the pain, humiliation, and guilt I'd carried for decades. The money that once chained me to a man's ego would now free others from theirs. When it was over, I sat back and whispered, it's done. Elijah came in moments later, his sleeves rolled up, still smelling faintly of antiseptic and coffee. You look lighter, he said. I think I am. He smiled. That's what happens when you stop holding ghosts. In the following weeks, the foundation became everything I dreamed it would be. Women arrived from every corner of the city, some bruised, some silent, some broken in ways words can't describe. But within those walls, they began to heal. We called them by their names, not their stories. One night, a woman named Trina said, when I came here, I thought my life was over, but I realized I just hadn't started living it yet. Her words struck me deeply, because that was me once dead long before dying, breathing but invisible. I stood before them, my voice steady, even as my muscles betrayed me. You don't have to be perfect to be free. You just have to stop apologizing for surviving. They clapped softly, not out of pity but in recognition. We were all survivors in different forms. Then came the night Marcus appeared for the last time. I was locking up the foundation when I heard his voice behind me. Savannah. It was softer now, ragged. I turned. He looked older, thinner, stripped of everything that made him dangerous. His hair was grayer, his suit rumpled. The arrogance was gone, replaced by a kind of hollow pleading I never thought I'd see. I didn't come to fight, he said, holding up a small briefcase. I came to make peace. There's nothing left between us to make peace over. I lost everything, he said quietly. My career, my reputation, my mother's respect. I just wanted you to know I'm sorry. I stared at him for a long moment. You're not sorry for what you did. You're sorry for what it cost you. He flinched. I took a step closer. You once told your mother you'd only stay with me until you inherited everything. Well, you did. You inherited my silence, my pain. And now my absence. That's all yours. He opened his mouth, but no words came. I reached into my purse and handed him an envelope. This is the last thing you'll ever get from me. He hesitated, then took it. What is it? Closure. Then I turned and walked away. Later, Elijah found me sitting on the front steps, breathing slowly. He's gone, I said. He nodded. For good. For good. And for the first time, I truly believed it. The months that followed were a soft blur. My illness progressed quietly. My steps grew slower, my hands weaker, but my heart, it was strong, stronger than it had ever been. Elijah stayed close. Sometimes we'd talk for hours under the dim lights of the clinic. Sometimes we'd just sit in silence, the kind that feels like understanding. One night, I told him, I'm not afraid of dying anymore. He took my hand gently. What changed? I finally lived. That night, I couldn't sleep. The world was still, the air cool and clear. I walked through the foundation one last time, room by room, touching each wall, each piece of furniture, each memory. In Lena's room, she was asleep, her hand resting on her little red bracelet. I tucked the blanket around her shoulders and whispered, "Keep writing your story, baby girl." In the hallway, I paused by the mural the children had painted a sun, shining over a row of houses with a single phrase written underneath in bright blue paint. "You are seen." I smiled. Yes, I finally am. Then I went to my office, sat at my desk, and began writing letters, one for Elijah, one for Lena, one for Miss Della, and one for Evelyn. Each one simple, honest. When dawn broke, I lay down on the couch, the compass necklace against my heart. The last thing I remember thinking was that the light coming through the window felt exactly like forgiveness. They found me hours later, peaceful, smiling. Elijah didn't weep, not at first. He just held my hand and whispered, "You kept your promise, Savannah." At her funeral, Thareta, there were no marble crypts or gilded speeches, just flowers, laughter, and stories told by women whose lives she had changed. Lena placed her red bracelet around the young almond tree they planted for me in the foundation garden. "She's not gone," she said softly. "She's just in the wind now." And maybe she was right, because the day after I died, the wind blew harder through South Shore than it had in years. It carried the smell of bread from Miss Della's kitchen, the sound of children laughing, and the soft voice of a woman who once whispered, "I'm done running." And somewhere in that breeze, I swear, I was still there. Savannah Rodess's story began with betrayal, a cruel husband, a poisonous mother-in-law, and a marriage built on contempt. For years, she lived inside a mansion that was really a cage, praised in public and mocked in private. The day she overheard Marcus and Evelyn laughing about her body and her money was the day something in her broke, and something else awakened. She vanished without a trace, leaving behind a single note, "Thanks for showing your true colors." From that moment, she shed every layer of wealth and illusion. As Maya Solar, she rebuilt herself in the quiet heart of South Shore, a place where no one cared about her last name. She scrubbed clinic floors, comforted strangers, and rediscovered what love meant through the eyes of a sick child named Lena and a weary doctor named Elijah. What began as hiding became healing. What began as escape became purpose. With her last strength, Savannah transformed her fortune into the Maya Solar Foundation, a sanctuary for women like her, unseen, underestimated, and unbroken. Even as illness consumed her body, she refused to let bitterness consume her soul. When she died, there were no cameras, no headlines, only wind moving through the garden where an almond tree grew in her name. Yet her story didn't end there. Her letters, her journal, her foundation, they became a movement. Women whispered her words in classrooms, shelters, and kitchens across the country. You don't have to be perfect to be free. You just have to stop apologizing for surviving. And in that truth, Savannah lived on, not as a victim, but as a voice. If you want to watch the full story unfold, click the YouTube player in the description below.